second grade. Welcome to Writing Workshop. So today's the last day we're going to spend together on writing your narrative. Friends, today's the day that we're going to work on our closing, and we'll spend just a little bit of time on thinking about how to edit the piece. So boys and girls, when we're closing a piece, it's really important that we actually take the time to think about how we're going to wrap up that piece. After all the planning on craft and action and talk and comparisons that you've been doing, we really want to kind of wrap that piece up in a big bow to show our pride in our work. Friends, here's the target that we're going to hit today. I chose the action, talk, or feeling that would make a good ending. I'm also going to spend a little bit of time highlighting some of the transition words that I used. We haven't really talked about that, but that should have been happening all throughout the piece, just like you learned already in second grade, because when we tell a story about something that happened to us, we're really traveling through time. Even if it's a short amount of time, we really want to take the reader through our piece in a matter of time. So I'll talk about some of those words that I used. And you know what? Our mini lesson is going to feel a little bit like that lead mini lesson, because I have created a menu of closings that you could use to close your piece. These are closings that you're familiar with from second grade already. Friends, in a closing, you want to give the reader kind of a feeling of closing a book. They will feel a sense of closure after your closing. You want to give the reader kind of a feeling or a thought. You want to leave them with either your feeling or your thoughts, or leave them with a feeling or thought. And you also want to make sure that you've answered all their questions and that they don't have any more wonderings after they've read your piece. So friends, here's one closing that you all have really enjoyed in the past. It's a feeling closing. So this is the closing that helps a reader see into your heart. And we use a lot of feeling adjectives, such as happy or excited or scared, or even a sentence that tells the way you're feeling. So here's some of the adjectives. Here's an example of using adjectives in your feeling closing. I was so grateful to have my family back together again. Or, I was thrilled to finally meet my hero. Friends, one thing that I want to tell you as a little preview to your third grade narrative writing is that your third grade teachers are going to remind you that it's really, really better to show your reader how you're feeling instead of just telling them. So that involves a little more craft, but read this one. The embarrassment boiled up inside of me. I would never cheat on the test again. So you could tell that that writer was feeling a little bit embarrassed and anxious inside. And how could you tell? Because the feelings were boiling up inside. I think that is a great example of showing, not telling your feelings. An action closing is really awesome because we can watch the character's actions to leave your reader feeling satisfied. You know, they've gotten to know you and your family and your characters so well that they want to picture what you're doing like they're watching a movie. And they can do that if you use strong verbs, such as this one. Jonas blew on his icy fingertips. You can see it happening. And rubbed his hands together. You could almost act these out when you're using an action closing. How about this one? As our truck chugged up the hill, we knew we would never see the house again. You can picture that truck chugging up the hill. And of course, when you're using action, you can always use those onomatopoeias that we've talked about, such as this one. Whoosh! A bright light flashed against the night sky. That was the night I saw my first shooting star. Friends, another way to close your piece that you've gotten really skilled at is using dialogue in your closing. You know, when we've gotten to know those characters, we want to be a part of the conversation. We want to listen and hear the frustration or the excitement or the worry in your voice. So what about this one? This was the best vacation ever, I exclaimed. Or, "We won," I shouted. "We finally won." Those are really good dialogue closings. And then this is a really interesting closing, kind of like you're talking to yourself and you're thinking, or you're revealing some of your inside thoughts with a future wish closing. Here's an example of a thinking closing. I thought to myself, "Michael was so helpful. I'm glad he's my friend." So you're having that dialogue with yourself. And here are some really cool future wish closings. "Losing my dog was the scariest moment of my life. I hope that never happens again." So you're really thinking about the future and telling your friends how this has affected what you're thinking about your future. How about this future wish? "Colorado is the prettiest state. I can't wait to go back to the mountains someday." We don't want to just say, "I can't wait to go back there again," because that doesn't really explain what you're hoping to do again. You want to be detailed. And then the final closing that I'm going to talk about today is an update. So this is kind of a neat one, and you've used it in your second grade writing already, because sometimes the reader gets so curious about your story and the way it's affected your life that they want to know what happened and how it's affected you today. How about this update closing? "I learned my lesson that day, and I've never left my mom in the store again." Or, this is a really famous update closing by Patricia Polacco from Thundercake, one of my favorite personal narratives. She wrote, "When the thunder roared above us so hard that it shook the windows and rattled the dishes in the cupboard, we just smiled and ate our thunder cake." Actually, that part is more of an action closing, but listen to her update. "From that time on, I never feared the voice of thunder again." So friends, these are your menu. This is your menu for your closings, and I will link this onto your slides so that you can choose one of these endings. And I want you to read my closing, and I want you to think about what kind of closing I use from our menu. I'm going to read the closing, and then I'm going to go back and highlight a couple craft moves that I also was using in my closing. So remember yesterday, I was still trying to get up on those skis. This is my last part of my narrative. My next attempt had to be it. Mr. Buckmiller was generous, but he wasn't going to keep circling the boat back again and again all day. So I repeated his words in my head, and the next thing I knew, I was sitting back and the boat was pulling me up. True, I was so hunched over that I looked like a lowercase r doing a squat, but I was skiing. Since then, my skills have grown to slaloming, that's on one ski, and jumping the wake. Just ask my new boat driver, Mrs. Siddha. What kind of closing do you think I used? I bet this left you with a thought. What kind of closing? You're right. I gave you an update. I took you from my 9-year-old Summer to now. And I tried to update you on how well I've learned to ski since back then. So boys and girls, as I said, I'm going to go back and talk a little bit about some craft that I used in my closing. Let me grab a marker because I want to mark up this page just a little bit so you can see that when I said I was so hunched over that I looked like a lowercase r, I was trying to use a comparison. Here's my pan balance. I was comparing the way I looked to a lowercase r. I also used something that we haven't really talked about yet this week, but I used what I call a twin phrase. It's not exactly a whole sentence, but it's a twin phrase because I was afraid you might not know this expert language, slaloming, and that's on one ski, when you're skiing on one ski. So boys and girls, I did use craft in my page because we should be doing that on every page. In addition to using the elaboration craft, I told you that we are going to talk a little bit about those transition words. So friends, since then is kind of like a link between then, when I was skiing when I was a 9, and now. There are also some transition words that I'm going to show you by marking it up with a link. When I said my next attempt, that's kind of moving my story along and trying to tell you what's happening next. Same with this so. That is another transition word. Here I am again. The next thing I knew, I'm actually moving the story along with transition words. So I really challenge you, friends, that when you're done crafting your story, I want you to go back to your checklist and I want you to make sure you're checking off everything on your checklist that should be in a second grade piece. Show evidence and then check it off your checklist. Now, once you're done composing your piece, it's really important that you edit. We're not going to spend a lot of time on editing today, friends, but I really just want to point you out to the back of your checklist. Friends, these are the rules of our grammar writing that will make it easier for readers to read your piece. Because you did a beautiful job telling a story, but this wasn't a story for you. It was a story for you to share with someone else. And I can't wait to read them when we get back to school. And you'll be able to share them as well. So I want you to make sure that you're spelling words with the spelling patterns that you know and you've talked about in school and you notice when you're reading. Same with your sight words. You know the way a word looks in your head. Make sure it's spelled that way. Friends, don't forget your punctuation, and by now we should be using a lot of contractions because that's the way we talk. Did you hear me? That's the way we talk. We talk with contractions. Boys and girls, don't forget to use capitals appropriately. They should not be creeping into your writing. And go ahead and use commas. We've talked about commas when we list things. We've also talked about commas in a conjunction when we join two sentences together with and, but, because. So those are the times that you would use your commas. Boys and girls, I am so proud of you listening to all our mini lessons this week, of trying your craft, of showing us your craft. I am really, really proud of you because you've taken what you already knew, you've reviewed it, and you are driving your own learning. You're doing a fabulous job, writers. Have a great day today.